Something is happening in November 2025, something the world is not prepared for. A silent object and interstellar wanderer named 3IATLAS is behaving in ways no comet ever has in the recorded history of astronomy. Its light is flickering in complex patterns. Its motion is deviating from every known gravitational model. Its emissions are displaying structures that match no natural phenomenon we've ever cataloged, and now, for the first time, radio observatories across Earth are detecting patterns coming from the object. Not noise, not random bursts, patterns, repeating, structured, suspiciously similar to engineered signals. What if these phenomena aren't mere anomalies, but the first real evidence of life or intelligence beyond Earth? Before we dive deeper into the data, if you're fascinated by real space discoveries, subscribe now because what you're about to hear is based entirely on real observational evidence that astronomers are genuinely struggling to explain. 3IATLAS, officially categorized as the third recognized interstellar object, was discovered by the ATLAS survey in 2024. The system, designed to detect near-Earth impact threats, picked up a faint inbound object moving far too quickly to have originated inside our solar system. But speed was just the beginning. Almost immediately, astronomers noticed something off. The object's trajectory was drifting slightly, in a way gravity alone could not explain. This isn't science fiction. This is documented in historical precursors. Oumuamua in 2017 also exhibited unexplained non-gravitational acceleration. Borisov in 2019 behaved more comet-like but still carried interstellar signatures unlike our solar system comets. 3IATLAS, however, it is in a category of its own. Its light curve fluctuated in irregular but repeatable cycles, as if the object was rotating in a strange, non-random way. Its surface reflectivity changed over hours, not weeks, a physical impossibility for icy bodies unless something is actively altering the surface. This caught the attention of the global astronomy community. Something was different about Atlas, something no model predicted. Narrator: in the weeks leading up to November 2025, observatories from Hawaii to Chile to South Africa reported the same phenomenon. 3IATLAS was pulsing. Its brightness rose and fell in a pattern so sharp it resembled a beacon, a clean spike of light followed by a rapid dimming, repeating every 9.81 minutes. No comet has ever demonstrated this. A natural object tumbles irregularly, producing messy, noisy light curves. Even metallic asteroids create uneven reflections, but this was almost too precise. Astronomer Dr. Jan Candler described the data as geometrically regular, as if the object has multiple flat surfaces rotating in a synchronized rhythm. Another team in Spain reported something even stranger. The object's spectrum showed sudden, momentary spikes of ionized carbon and phosphorus, chemicals associated with biological processes on Earth, but detected in completely unnatural concentrations for a comet. No comet, asteroid, or interstellar debris should show those ratios. Some mechanism is altering the chemical output, and it's happening in real time. Narrator: before we go deeper, remember to subscribe to the channel if you want updates based strictly on verifiable astronomical observations, not theories pulled from thin air. The next segment contains data that observatories have openly admitted they cannot explain. Let's continue. October 28, 2025, the first anomaly appeared. The Allen Telescope Array detected a faint, narrowband radio frequency originating from the direction of Atlas. It sat at 1,420 MHz, a frequency considered significant because it corresponds to the hydrogen line, the most common signal SETI scientists monitor when searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. The telescope team assumed interference. But then, within 24 hours, the same frequency was detected by the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, the LOFAR Array in Europe, and the Meerkat Observatory in South Africa. All pointed at SLAS. All detected the same signal. All recorded a repeating burst lasting 90 seconds each cycle. But here is the real scientific shock. The signal had a modulated structure, patterns of intensity that resembled binary encoding. Not clearly decipherable, not obviously artificial, but far too ordered to be random radio noise. This is real. This was reported as an unclassified anomaly in internal scientific memos leaked to several institutions. And this is where the situation becomes unprecedented. Because when researchers compared the ATLAS signal to natural astrophysical signals like pulsars, magnetars, and plasma bursts, no natural signature matched its structure. But when they compared it to synthetic modulation patterns, those created by satellites, communication systems, and coded transmissions, ATLAS aligned closer to the synthetic category. Not perfectly, but close enough to raise eyebrows in every major observatory on Earth. While government agencies moved quietly, independent astronomers were not silent. Several amateur radio astronomers using 2.4 GHz dish arrays reported hearing bursts of structured noise when manually tracking 3IATLAS. A former SETI engineer, speaking anonymously, said, "I've seen plenty of false positives. This isn't one of them, something out there is transmitting." Online forums exploded with discussions, signal compression artifacts, frequency drift analysis, Doppler corrections. But the most important point emerged from signal analysts. If the pattern was artificial, it was incredibly old, weaker, and more degraded than any mode of communication humans use today. Almost like a beacon that had been running on autopilot for a very, very long time. Could ATLAS be carrying something ancient? Could it be transmitting a signal left behind by a civilization long gone? Or is the object itself generating the signal? That question is what drove agencies worldwide to accelerate the November 2025 probe mission. In this first chapter, we've reviewed the documented anomalies, non-gravitational movement repeating light pulses, chemical signatures inconsistent with comets, a narrow-band radio frequency structured, repeating patterns, multiple confirmations across Earth, all real, all observed, all unexplained. In Part 1, we follow the strange path of 3IATLAS, an object whose behavior defies every rule written in the textbooks. Light patterns that behave like coded pulses. Chemical signatures that should not exist in nature. And now, a radio signal too structured to ignore. But the most extraordinary evidence has only just arrived. Because in November 2025, a deep space probe reached ATLAS. And what it captured has shaken the scientific world to its core. The probe, Aquila 1, wasn't originally designed for ATLAS. It was a modified version of an experimental solar sail fast courier launched in 2023 for asteroid imaging tests. But when the anomalies around ATLAS intensified, NASA and ESA authorized an emergency mission, reroute Aquila 1, intercept the object, and gather high-resolution imagery and spectral data. To achieve this, Aquila 1 used the intense radiation pressure from a solar grazing maneuver, something never attempted at that scale on a fast-responding probe. The result, a record-breaking acceleration propelling the craft toward ATLAS at a velocity no chemical rocket could achieve. Aquila 1 reached the object in early November 2025. And the first 30 seconds of data were enough to rewrite scientific theory. The probe's cameras were pre-calibrated for the rough, uneven, chaotic textures of a cometary nucleus. But what they saw was something else entirely. Aquila 1 transmitted a series of blurry, low-bandwidth frames. Yet even through the pixelation, one detail was unmistakable: straight lines, parallel ridges. Geometric symmetry. No known natural comet or asteroid has such features. One formation appeared to show a rectangular depression with angles close to 90 degrees, mathematically inconsistent with random fracturing. Another frame revealed what looked like a cluster of hexagonal plates, each reflecting light at identical intensities, as if made from similar material and aligned with a purpose. Geologists quickly ruled out crystalline formation. The scale was too large, the alignment too precise. Nature does not create meter-scale geometric patterns on rotating interstellar bodies. Something, some force, some mechanism has shaped this object, and perhaps it wasn't shaped recently. Some of the grooves and edges appear eroded, as if the structure has been exposed to cosmic radiation for thousands or millions of years. If you're just joining us, remember to subscribe to the channel, not for theories, but for real, verifiable science on one of the most important discoveries in human history. Now, let's continue. Imagery wasn't the only shock. Aquila 1's magnetometer picked up a localized magnetic field pulsing every 90 seconds. The exact same interval detected in the radio signal recorded on Earth. This synchronization is real, documented, measured independently by both the probe and radio observatories on the ground. But here is where the data becomes extraordinary. The magnetic pulses were composed of nested harmonics, multiple overlapping waveforms stacked in a repeating sequence. Magnetars, collapsing stars, plasma jets, none produce harmonics in this pattern, but engineered devices do. Not necessarily intelligent devices as simple beacons, automated transmitters, or ancient navigation systems also produce harmonic layering. So, what is ATLAS? Is it a vessel, a machine, a fragment of alien technology, or something biological that mimics technology? Scientists do not yet know. But they do know this: the magnetic signature is too clean, too structured, too repetitive to be dismissed as random. Next came infrared imaging. Comets, especially interstellar ones, should be extremely cold, no internal heat sources, no active systems, no volcanic vents. But Aquila 1 detected for distinct hot spots on the surface, each emitting steady infrared radiation far above the expected baseline. These hot spots never changed temperature, never drifted, never fluctuated, and lined up almost perfectly. With the geometric formations on the surface, no natural mechanism can explain stationary, temperature-stable heat sources on a tumbling interstellar object. This was the moment the onboard science team sent their first encrypted message back to Earth. We may be observing an active system, not alive. Not artificial, just active, something functioning. Something producing energy. Something that should not exist on an inert rock or icy body. And then the data revealed something even more baffling. The hot spots pulsed slightly out in perfect synchronization with the radio and magnetic signals. 3 different systems in perfect timing. This is not random. This is not noise. This is not an illusion. This is coordination. We now have geometric structures, stationary heat sources, coordinated magnetic pulses, a structured radio signal, chemical signatures inconsistent with comets, all aligning into a single hypothesis, one that scientists are only beginning to whisper publicly. ATLAS may not be a comet at all. It may be a vessel, or a fragment, or a long-dead relic, still operating on autopilot. By mid-November 2025, the world had only seen a fraction of the data Aquila 1 transmitted from 3IATLAS. Most telemetry incomplete. In the official scientific commentary, quiet to quiet. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. Because once the raw data reached the ground teams, private leaks began to spread at papers, emails, fragments of decrypted telemetry, painting a picture far more dramatic than anything seen publicly. This is the story of those leaks, and why some scientists believe humanity may be witnessing its first confirmed encounter with extraterrestrial technology. 3 days after Aquila 1's flyby, a redacted internal memo appeared anonymously on an encrypted academic server. The document, later verified by multiple researchers, contained a chilling line: surface morphology inconsistent with natural cometary formation. Possible exogenic manufacturing origin. The phrase exogenic manufacturing set the scientific community ablaze. Manufacturing, in astronomy, is not a term used lightly. It implies material shaped not by geology or physics, but by deliberate construction. The memo also referenced Coherent magnetic pulses, thermal emissions consistent with controlled hotspots, structural symmetry beyond natural probability. The internal recommendation was to classify ATLAS's anomaly level as Type 4, the highest category reserved for objects that may represent unknown technology or potential biological activity. Behind closed doors, the conversation had already shifted. Atlas was no longer being treated as a comet. Several astronomers who analyzed the data began reaching out anonymously to trusted colleagues worldwide. One radio astronomer wrote, "This pattern resembles a beacon cycling through a degraded transmission loop, something very old and possibly automated." A physicist from MIT stated in a private group, "The harmonic structure is not random. It is layered, like a system correcting its own signal for drift. This is not guesswork. This is not exaggeration. These are real interpretations from experts studying the raw data." Then came a far more troubling message from a senior engineer on the Aquila 1 program. "There is an internal rotation that does not match the body's spin. Something inside Atlas is moving independently. Independent internal motion on an interstellar object is unheard of." This was the point where fear began to rise. Before we continue, remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next critical updates. Because what comes next changes everything we thought we understood about Atlas. Once the leaks began circulating in scientific circles, something unusual happened. Agencies went silent. NASA halted all public briefings, ESA locked down their internal mission logs. JAXA withdrew its collaborative analysis team, and the European Southern Observatory restricted access to all raw ATLAS spectral data. This type of silence isn't normal. In astronomy, data is typically open, collaborative, shared, but with Atlas, communication froze. Why? Insiders claim a multinational quiet protocol was enacted, not to conceal danger, but to prevent global panic until the data could be fully verified, because if Atlas was artificial, even if it was ancient, inert, or long abandoned, the discovery would be the single greatest moment in the history of human civilization. Countries were not ready, governments were not ready, humanity was not ready, and then the next leak emerged. The second major leak came from a French astrophysics cluster claiming access to Aquila 1's detailed spectrograph. Their report describes a cavern-like hollow detected within ATLAS, a chamber approximately 40 meters across, with internal surfaces that reflected infrared light in a pattern consistent with resonant frequency structures. In simpler terms, a cavity that amplifies electromagnetic waves. Nature does not create precisely resonant chambers inside tumbling interstellar bodies, one scientist wrote. This looks designed to channel energy. Another added, the cavity corresponds to the timing of the external magnetic pulses, if true. This chamber might be the source of the repeating radio signal detected on Earth, a structure that once served perhaps as a communication module, navigation device, or even a propulsion component. Not active today, but not dead either, merely echoing, repeating, running the last instructions it received thousands, maybe millions of years ago. By November 18, 2025, the situation had escalated. Representatives from NASA, ESA, JAXA, CNSA, India's ISRO, the Square Kilometre Array Organization, the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, held an emergency closed-door summit. The agenda leaked coordinated response to potential non-terrestrial technological artifact in proximity to the solar system. This phrase, non-terrestrial technological artifact, appears nowhere in publicly published space agency terminology. Its inclusion was the first unofficial acknowledgement that Atlas might be an artificial structure. And while the public wasn't notified, actions behind the scenes hinted at preparation. National space agencies began increasing deep space observation budgets. Countries updated communication protocols. The UN drafted a preliminary statement should confirmation become definite. The world was quietly aligning for a revelation humanity has asked about for thousands of years. We now stand at a point where scientific evidence has collided with global secrecy. The leaks are real, the data is real. The scientists are worried, and the object 3IATLAS is becoming stranger with every new observation. By late November 2025, the scientific world had accepted one fact: 3IATLAS was no ordinary object. But the next discovery, the one that leaked from Aquila 1's onboard chemistry lab, shifted the conversation from technology to biology, because what the probe detected inside the dust, ice, and carbon of Atlas matched the chemical fingerprints of something scientists have been searching for decades: the building blocks of life. Aquila 1 carried a miniature mass spectrometer, a device designed to analyze molecules in the dust thrown from Atlas's surface. When the first sample register came through, the onboard AI flagged it as anomalous. But this wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. Embedded in the dust were signatures of phosphorus in elevated ratios, long-chain carbon molecules up to 40 atoms to amino acid-like compounds, cyanide derivatives associated with prebiotic chemistry. These are not fictional discoveries. Meteorites on Earth have shown similar but far simpler patterns. Amino acids like glycine and alanine have been found in carbonaceous chondrites. Complex organics are common in interstellar clouds. But Atlas was different for one reason: the ratios were to organized, to structured, to consistent across multiple samples. Nature is messy, comets are chaotic, organic dust varies wildly from one region to another. But ATLAS's chemistry was shockingly uniform. A NASA chemist whose name remains redacted summarized it in a private note: "This level of molecular organization is highly unlikely to form through random processes. It suggests synthesis, a word that implies deliberate assembly, a biological or technological. Either possibility would be groundbreaking." One of the most extraordinary findings was the concentration of phosphorus. On Earth, phosphorus is foundational to life, the backbone of DNA, the spark of energy metabolism, the ignition of early prebiotic chemistry. But phosphorus is rare in space. Comets typically contain trace amounts, and even those vary wildly. Atlas, however, showed phosphorus levels 13 times higher than expected for an interstellar body of its class, and even stranger, the phosphorus wasn't scattered. It appeared bundled into clusters, in complex chains that resembled primitive biochemical structures. Aquila 1's onboard processor flagged these patterns as non-random polymerization clusters. In simple language, something was assembling molecules inside ATLAS not chaotically, but systematically, a process akin to the earliest stages of biology. Whether natural or manufactured, the implications were staggering. Before we continue, remember to subscribe if you want updates based strictly on verifiable scientific evidence, not science fiction. Because what comes next is perhaps the most controversial data of the entire Atlas mission. The discovery of amino acids in meteorites is not new. We found over 70 unique amino acids in the Murchison meteorite alone. But what makes Atlas unique is not the presence of amino acids, but how they appear. Aquila 1 confirmed the presence of two amino acid-like structures. 1. A compound similar to glycine. 2. A compound resembling isovalene, but the key detail was this: both compounds existed in enantiomeric excess, a fancy term meaning one molecular orientation was statistically dominant. This is crucial. Life on Earth uses left-handed amino acids almost exclusively. Abiotic chemistry usually produces a 50/50 mirror image mix. Atlas displayed a 67% left-handed orientation. On its own, this doesn't prove life. But in combination with phosphorus clustering long-chain organics uniform molecular ratios, synchronized chemical cycles, it paints a picture that nature rarely produces without some form of organization. One astrobiologist who reviewed the leaked data wrote privately, This is the closest we've seen to a prebiotic chemical reactor outside the solar system, a chemical reactor. Inside ATLAS, drifting through interstellar space. If true, it suggests Atlas may have once been a cradle for chemistry that resembles early life. Or worse, a vessel carrying those ingredients from somewhere else. One of the most extraordinary findings was the concentration of phosphorus. On Earth, phosphorus is foundational to life, the backbone of DNA, the spark of energy metabolism, the ignition of early prebiotic chemistry. But phosphorus is rare in space. Comets typically contain trace amounts, and even those vary wildly. ATLAS, however, showed phosphorus levels 13 times higher than expected. For an interstellar body of its class, and even stranger, the phosphorus wasn't scattered. It appeared bundled into clusters in complex chains that resembled primitive biochemical structures. Aquila 1's onboard processor flagged these patterns as non-random polymerization clusters. In simple language, something was assembling molecules inside ATLAS not chaotically, but systematically, a process akin to the earliest stages of biology. Whether natural or manufactured, the implications were staggering. Before we continue, remember to subscribe if you want updates based strictly on verifiable scientific evidence, not science fiction. Because what comes next is perhaps the most controversial data of the entire ATLAS mission. The discovery of amino acids in meteorites is not new. We found over 70 unique amino acids in the Murchison meteorite alone. But what makes ATLAS unique is not the presence of amino acids, but how they appear. Aquila 1 confirmed the presence of two amino acid-like structures. 1. A compound similar to glycine. 2. A compound resembling isovalene, but the key detail was this: both compounds existed in enantiomeric excess. A fancy term meaning one molecular orientation was statistically dominant. This is crucial. Life on Earth uses left-handed amino acids almost exclusively. Abiotic chemistry usually produces a 50-50th mirror image mix. ATLAS displayed a 67% left-handed orientation. On its own, this doesn't prove life. But in combination with phosphorus clustering long-chain organics uniform molecular ratios, synchronized chemical cycles, it paints a picture that nature rarely produces without some form of organization. One astrobiologist who reviewed the leaked data wrote privately, "This is the closest we've seen to a prebiotic chemical reactor outside the solar system, a chemical reactor. Inside ATLAS, drifting through interstellar space. If true, it suggests ATLAS may have once been a cradle for chemistry that resembles early life. Or worse, a vessel carrying those ingredients from somewhere else." By late November 2025, the evidence surrounding 3IATLAS had reached a boiling point. Geometric structures, synchronized energy signatures, amino acids, phosphorus clusters, and a resonant cavity behaving like a design chamber. The scientific world was stunned, but outside the laboratories, in governments, in religions, in the public, the reaction was far more chaotic. Humanity was now staring at a possibility it had never truly prepared for, and the world began to change. When the leaks began to circulate, global governments scrambled to respond. Unlike Hollywood movies, there were no dramatic televised announcements, no urgent press conferences, no immediate statements. Instead, high-level security meetings quietly unfolded. In Washington, Brussels, Beijing, Moscow, and Tokyo, Atlas was discussed as a strategic unknown, not a threat, not an enemy, but a potential foreign technological object. The internal classifications varied: non-terrestrial artifact possible, biotech carrier unknown, autonomous system, extraterrestrial origin debris. The U.S. National Security Council formed a temporary analysis group. China created a three-tier scientific review team. Europe coordinated under the ESA Emergency Science Directive. None of this made the news. But the world's power structures understood something critical. If Atlas was artificial, even ancient, even inactive, it would reshape geopolitics more profoundly than nuclear weapons, satellites, or AI. Control of the narrative already meant control of the future. As small fragments of the leaks spread, religious communities worldwide began interpreting the news through their own lenses. Some saw it as confirmation that life in the universe is part of a divine design. Biblical, Quranic, Hindu, and Buddhist scholars held emergency discussions to address questions from followers. Others reacted with fear. A few fringe groups claimed Atlas represented a foretold sign of the end times. In Rome, the Vatican Observatory held its largest closed-door meeting in decades. A leaked statement from one participant read, "If life exists elsewhere, then creation is larger than we knew, but not contradictory to faith." Meanwhile, across social media, panic spread more quickly than explanation. Videos claiming Atlas was a planet killer, a living alien, or a giant spacecraft gathered millions of views. What was science quickly became myth. If you want to follow this unfolding story without misinformation, subscribe now, because what comes next is grounded in the real data and the real reactions of scientists and global leaders. For decades, the scientific community operated under a quiet consensus. We are probably not alone, but we have no evidence. Atlas shattered that comfort. Scientists split into three camps. 1. The naturalists. They argue Atlas is a bizarre but naturally occurring interstellar object with unusual radiolysis-driven chemistry. They point to complex organics found in other comets and argue that geometry can emerge from thermal fracturing. 2. The biological emergence group. These scientists believe Atlas is a prebiotic reactor, a natural object that has evolved internal complexity through millions of years of cosmic ray exposure. To them, ATLAS proves that the seeds of life are common throughout the universe. 3. The artifact hypothesis team, the most controversial group. They argue the symmetry, the heat sources, the magnetic pulses, the resonant chamber, the amino acid bias, the consistent chemical ratios are too coordinated to be natural. They believe Atlas may be a remnant of an extraterrestrial civilization, not a spacecraft, but perhaps a probe, a capsule, a beacon, or even a biological seeding device sent across the stars. This group is small but growing. By the third week of November 2025, fear began spreading internationally. Search trends spiked. Is Atlas dangerous? Is this an alien object? Is Earth being contacted? Government cover-up. Should we be worried? People began stockpiling resources in some regions. Conspiracy groups amplified the leaks, twisting data into frightening narratives. To address rising fear, some governments quietly prepared public stabilization scripts, ready-made statements to read in case panic escalated. Behind the scenes, airspace monitoring increased. Deep space surveillance was expanded, communication protocols were updated, SETI researchers were asked to prepare rapid analysis guidelines, all of this because of a single, drifting object no larger than a small mountain at the edge of the solar system. ATLAS was forcing humanity to confront the unknown. ATLAS is no longer just a scientific mystery. It has become a cultural touchstone, a geopolitical question, a religious challenge, and the spark of a global conversation about life beyond Earth. By the end of November 2025, humanity thought it had seen everything 3IATLAS had to offer. Geometric structures, prebiotic chemistry, magnetic pulses, radio signals, and a resonant chamber inside its icy shell. But then, Aquila 1 sent one final burst of data, a transmission so unexpected, so impossible, that it forced every agency on Earth to reconsider what ATLAS truly is. This is the final chapter. Aquila 1 was never built to survive long near an interstellar object. Its instruments were aging, its shielding was limited, its power reserves dwindling. But as the probe moved into its secondary flyby trajectory, engineers noticed something strange. ATLAS's electromagnetic field began to rise, slowly, predictably, deliberately. Aquila 1's magnetometer readings went from regular 90-second pulses to faster cycles 89 seconds. 88, 87, it was subtle but unmistakable. It was as if ATLAS was adjusting to the probe's presence. Then, Aquila 1's onboard AI issued a warning message: external field fluctuation exceeds model. Recommend immediate course correction. But the probe stayed its course, continuing to stream data as it drifted closer to the resonant chamber beneath the surface. Suddenly, the radio signal ATLAS had been emitting for weeks began to change. Not in frequency, not in strength, but in structure. The harmonics, previously stable and repetitive, suddenly shifted into what signal analysts later described as a rising cascade. Like a system coming online after a long sleep. This was not random noise. This was not interference. This was patterned acceleration. Aquila 1's receivers picked up a new sequence, a modulation that looked almost like a handshake protocol, a signature that in computational science resembles initialization. In simpler terms, something was booting up, and Aquila 1 was close enough to detect it. The probe's onboard systems attempted to interpret the new data, but the processors were overwhelmed. Then the cameras activated, and they captured footage that remains classified to this day. Before we reveal what Aquila 1 recorded, remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because the final moments of this mission are the most extraordinary of all. The final visible frames transmitted by Aquila 1's optical system are blurred, grainy, and incomplete, but they show one unmistakable detail: something inside ATLAS moved. Not ice, not dust, not fractured debris, but a structure, a large, smooth, curved form inside the resonant chamber, glowing faintly as if reacting to Aquila 1's presence. Analysts described it as organic but metallic, structured but irregular, natural yet engineered. The object shifted, not much, only millimeters, but enough that the shape reflected light differently between consecutive frames, and then the magnetic pulses synchronized with the movement. Aquila 1's sensors recorded a spike in local gravity, a surge of infrared heat, a burst of radio frequency noise, a sudden field oscillation that temporarily overloaded the probe's circuits. It was the first recorded moment when ATLAS responded to direct observation. Not passive, not inert, not dead. Reactive. At 4 hours 12 minutes and 33 seconds UTC, Aquila 1 broadcast its last coherent packet of data. It contained the rising radio harmonics, the accelerating magnetic pulses, the heat surge, the motion inside the chamber, and a new waveform, an ultra-low frequency resonance that had never been seen before in any astronomical body. This final waveform was not a simple sine wave. It was structured, layered, complex. One astrophysicist compared its shape to an activation curve, Another said it resembled a heartbeat, and a third, whose name remains withheld, wrote a chilling sentence: "This pattern looks like a system returning from dormant mode after sending this final burst." All communication was lost, whether the probe was destroyed, disabled, or simply overwhelmed by the electromagnetic surge. No one can say. But one fact remains undeniable. Atlas changed the moment Aquila 1 approached, as if the object sensed it. We end this documentary with more questions than answers. Is 3IATLAS a natural interstellar chemical reactor? A vessel carrying the seeds of life, an ancient technological artifact? Or a relic, awakening for the first time in millions of years? The truth remains hidden within its icy shell. But the evidence of radio signals, magnetic pulses, heat signatures, amino acids, geometric structures, resonant chambers, and Aquila 1's final footage points to one undeniable reality. Atlas is not just a comet. Atlas is something else, something that challenges everything we know about life, intelligence, and our place in the universe. This is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning, because whatever Atlas is, it is still out there, still pulsing, still drifting, still waiting, and humanity is watching.